Good morning, friends. My name is John Higgins, and welcome to another South St. George show. If you've been here before, it's always a pleasure to see you. Welcome back. And if you're new to our programs, welcome to the party. This is how we start our week. Every Monday morning, we celebrate entertainment's leaders, legends, and icons, and this morning is certainly no exception. Today, we are taking a virtual road trip to Claremore, Oklahoma. We are visiting the Will Rodgers Museum, and we are very honored to be joined by Executive Director of the museum, Tad Jones. Now, please be sure to keep your camera and microphone off throughout today's program. If you have any questions on Zoom or on Facebook, share them in the chat, and I'll be relaying any questions you might have to Sal and to Tad. And if you'd like, hop on the chat right now to let us know where you're joining us from. This will factor in later, I promise. Next week, Sal's going to be talking about movie therapy and lessons you can learn from movies with L.E. Wilson. That's going to be an interesting one, so I hope you'll join us. And as always, we have Cassandra St. George behind the scenes, making sure that everything runs smoothly. So Cassandra, if you'd like to hop in the chat and say hi as well, that'd be great. Anyway, without any further ado, here's the man of the hour, Sal St. George. Sal, are you there?
Hey, I'm right here, and so good to see you. And we also have Darren right on the sidelines here.
Hey, Darren.
Yeah, we don't ordinarily have an opportunity to have Darren. Whoop, there he is.
Hi, everybody.
He's poking his head in. So
Two special guests.
I'm very excited about today's program. And just so we recap for new guests, our program began almost 3 years ago now. And it was basically an idea to keep the names of these celebrity museums alive. The pandemic hit all of them significantly, and in the interim, we know that 2 of them were closed down. And I don't want to mention their names, but 2 of the celebrity museums were forced to close because of the pandemic. Any support that we all can give to these museums is deeply appreciated. So, without further ado, let's get Tad Jones in here, and let's get right into the museum. There he is. Good morning.
Good morning, Sal. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Tad, how long have you been there at the museum?
Going into my 8th year. I started about 2014, and so this is my 8th year to be here. And you know, I grew up 2 miles down the road to this museum, and then I went to school in the little town of Oologah, which is where Will Rodgers was born. So I went to school 2 miles from where he was born. So I've been around this facility and the birthplace literally my entire life. So it's been great.
And did you have much of an understanding or about Will Rodgers prior to becoming the executive director?
But when you're around here, yes, you do. So we get to tour the museum when we were kids. I still have a song that I have in my head that when I was, in 4th grade that we sang at the birthplace for Will's birthday, which is on November 4th. He was born on Election Day. And so, yeah, we've been around this a long time, and there was always events and activities and, Easter egg hunts down the hill that I went to as a kid. So it was a part of our life when you're around here.
And it's appropriate that today is President's Day because Will Rodgers had a lot to say about presidents.
He absolutely did. He was friends of 7 presidents from Teddy Roosevelt on to FDR. Matter of fact, the horse that he had when he was on stage in vaudeville there in New York, his horse is named Teddy after Teddy Roosevelt, but he was a friend of a lot of presidents.
Terrific. Now I see a beautiful painting behind you.
Yeah, this is a Wayne Cooper painting, and it's a painting of Will at the birthplace ranch. So that's called the White House on the Verdigris. That's where Will's dad was built when he moved to Oologah in northeast Oklahoma. It was in Indian territory. So Will actually, even though he's Oklahoma's favorite son, Will never lived in Oklahoma. It was before it was a state. He was born in 1879, right here in this house in the corner, right over here. And but Will's dad was a very prominent Cherokee and businessman in northeast Oklahoma. So most people have heard about the Trail of Tears when the Cherokees were removed from their Indian territory in Alabama and came here to Oklahoma. But the Rodgers family was what they called early settlers. They came earlier than the Trail of Tears. They knew what was about to happen. So they came a little bit earlier and kind of set up stake a little bit earlier than in the Trail of Tears. So Will's dad had the White House on the Verdigris and ended up growing it to a 60,000 acre ranch and had a lot of cattle. And that's where Will learned to rope and ride.
Sounds great. Now, the property that you're on right now, was purchased by Will Rodgers, correct?
Right. In 1911, Will and Betty purchased this land because they were hoping to retire right here in Claremore. So when Clem, Will's dad, left the birthplace, he moved to Claremore and started up a bank and did some other things. And then Will was always coming back here. Matter of fact, he said Claremore was his hometown because nobody could pronounce Oolaga. And so he loved Claremore, lots of family here. And so they bought this property in 1911 in order to hopefully build a retirement home and retire in Claremore.
All right, I've got a really interesting question for you. For people that do not know Will Rodgers, how would you describe the man?
Oh, he was a man of all traits. He could talk to anybody. He was a man of great character, from kings to the common man. He was a simple person as well. I mean, he loved to just chat with anybody. He had a great, simple personality about himself, and had a great enthusiasm for life. It's almost impossible to do a simple description of Will because he did so much. He worked hard. He traveled the world. He had fun with his life. He was friends of kings and presidents, and he would rather sit with a baseball team in Hawaii and talk about their experience than when the president asked him to come with him. You know, he just had that ability to be a friend of everybody. And that's why, you know, his famous line is, "I never met a man I didn't like," because when he saw people, he saw the good in them immediately and wanted to be their friend. And so that's what endeared him to people from all walks of life, all across Oklahoma, across the United States, and really even across the world.
Okay, let's take a little tour around your beautiful museum.
All right, we'll walk over here. First, I'm going to take you to the gift shop. It's usually the last place you go, but because our museum travels that direction, our gift shop is over here by the entryway. We're gonna pop in there for just a second, show you some of the things that we have, and then I'll show you a few more of the exhibits as we go through.
Tad, now, is that your son that's manning
it?
It
Is. My son is back here, and he's got the camera. So if he does anything
what's
wrong,
his name?
His name is Logan Jones.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, Logan. I'm glad you're part of it.
You bet. He's happy to be here. So I got him out of bed to help us out this morning. So this is our gift shop. And when this building built, this is a diorama room, which we'll see some dioramas later. And so when I was a kid, you walk down to a room and they had all these dioramas and you look through a little port, but they're in a different area. But so now we've got this great gift shop, and you've got Will Rodgers books, so many books written about Will.
Can you
quote books about Will.
Can you get close to some of those items so that we can see them up close? Get real close, yeah.
Yeah, come on up here, Logan. So these are a lot of the items that, books. This is the biography from Ben Yagoda, probably the one of the most in-depth. We have all kinds of quote books about from Will Rodgers. He just had so many quotes that are still appropriate today.
Okay, Ted, if somebody wants to learn, what book would you recommend, or is there one or two?
Well, the best one is Betty's book. This is from Betty Blake. That was his wife, Betty Rodgers. And it's, of course, it's firsthand. So you get to hear a lot of behind the scenes things about Will, how he handled things, his character, and those kind of deals. If you want an incredibly in-depth history of Will, then the Ben Yagoda book, Will Rodgers, a biography. And so both those books are great of learning about the man, Will Rodgers. I think we both have both those on our website. Actually, the gift shop is run by online by Will Rodgers' great-granddaughter, Jennifer Rodgers Echeverry, who lives out in Bakersfield, California. So they're still very involved in the family. So, and then we have a new children's book. We talk about President's Day. You can't help but plug this new children's book that we just got. And it's Will Rodgers and the Great White House Sleepover by Bart Taylor, who is also one of our employees here. He's our Will Rodgers interpreter. But Will Rodgers got to stay in the White House with Calvin Coolidge. So if you want to learn about Will Rodgers, you got kids and grandkids, this is a great book that you can also get and share about Will Rodgers' experience in the White House.
Okay, let's look around the room and see what other little items you might have.
All right, we'll walk over here real quick. Lots of shirts about Will's quotes. It's not what here on business. It's not what you pay a man that costs you, or it's not what you pay a man, but what he costs you that counts. A man only learns by two things. One is reading, and the other is association with smarter people. You can't legislate intelligence and common sense into people. we just got a lot of shirts about different topics, top 10 quotes,
Now,
politics.
all these quotes that, all the quotes that he has, was that through his writing? Because he was quite a prolific writer.
Yeah, he was amazing because he wrote a daily column from 27 until the day he died, 1935. He wrote a weekly column starting in 1922. He did radio, he did movies. And what's amazing about all that, everything he did was him. Today you look at, your late night hosts and all that, or Saturday Night Live, whatever it is, they've got hosts and hosts of writers behind the scenes. Everything that Will wrote, his millions of words, his commentary was all Will Rodgers, and that's what makes him incredibly unique. Other gift shop things we got mugs, of course, that have quotes as well. And then, we're right a mile off of Route 66, which that has been a big help for us. You have so many people that are traveling ever since probably the early 90s. Route 66 picked up, so we've got a wall of Route 66 stuff. We got Made in Oklahoma, and then we have a kids item as well. But always the favorites are Will Rodgers quotes because they are as great today as he said them 90 years ago.
Tad, how has the pandemic affected your museum?
Well, we were closed for a couple of months in 2020 as everybody was trying to figure out, what was going on. And then, the biggest things were the tour buses and the school kids stopped coming. Those were huge for us. So many tour groups, so many kids from regional schools that would come here and learn about Will Rodgers, and those pretty much ended. They're starting to come back a little bit now. We're hearing from tour bus operators that they're actually going to have a better year this year than they had in 2019, which would be great. So hopefully things will kind of settle, but it hit us pretty hard. One thing though that has changed dramatically, that has helped us, is RV travel. People were buying RVs all over the place. And so we are partnered with a group that has RVs that can park in our parking lot. So we've had a lot of RVs come, but that first year especially was tough. But we're a state agency. In 1938, this facility was built by the state of Oklahoma. So we've had some help. You mentioned some museums closed down, and that was definitely would have been a challenge here, except we've had support from the state of Oklahoma to help with our funding.
And you mentioned you have an international audience?
We do lots of international travels. And what's amazing, we'll have international travels here, mainly Route 66 people that are traveling through. They'll get motorcycles in Chicago and travel to Santa Monica in California, or get Corvettes. And so they're always coming through. So we had a lot of international travel, and we find that a lot of them know more about Will Rodgers than the locals because they've done their homework. They studied places they want to go, and they learn about Will. And a lot of the countries, Will Rodgers went to those as well.
We have an interesting question. You mentioned these people know a lot about Will Rodgers. So Patty Robinson asks, is Will Rodgers among those unfortunate icons who often have quotes inaccurately attributed to them? Or do people know things about Will that aren't true?
Absolutely, there are quotes. So if you Google Will Rodgers and get quotes pulled up, at least half of them are not, we can't confirm them. Now, our official line is we can't confirm that he said it, but maybe he did, because there's so many of them out there that are good. But I'll take, just for instance, this one right here, a man only learns by two things. One is reading, and the other is associated with smarter people. Now, that quote is an actual Will Rodgers quote. But a lot of people throw in at the very end of that, they'll say a man learns by three things. And the last part they'll say, and the third is by peeing on the electric fence, which Will did not say, but it is out there in the public square. So to answer your question, absolutely. So if you do want to use a real Will Rodgers quote, go to our website, willrodgers.com, call us up. We'll confirm the quote, because we're trying to clean those up a little bit, but there's so many of them. We figure Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, and Will Rodgers said about everything. So, everything's attributed to one of those three.
I think everybody's getting a little bit eager to get into the museum. So let's
let's
mosey on along.
All right. Well, as you go here this is what we call the West Gallery. One of the first exhibits that you see is what we call a glimpse of Will's world. So we did this to show people, Will Rodgers talked about or visited every state in the Union and several countries. So what you can do as a visitor, you get to click on a state, like we'll take New York, where you're located, and a bunch of quotes will pull up about New York. So if you go do anything in New York, no matter if you pay 50 cents or $5, there will be a policeman just in front of you. And you can sell a pair of shoes in New York without it's done through the stock exchange. I got an order in with a broker for 10 subway tickets. So we've got quotes of different states all across the country.
Logan,
There's
can you get
also,
closer to the screen?
yeah, Logan, pull it up. Like this is Colorado. So there's also places that have honored Will Rodgers. Like this is the Will Rodgers Shrine of the Sun. So if there's anybody that's ever been to Colorado Springs, if you go to the zoo and then go up the hill there's a big tower, and that tower is called Will Rodgers Shrine of the Sun. So there's different places around the country that have statues. If you're in Texas, for instance, we don't have a picture of it, but there's 2 Will Rodgers statues in Texas, one at Texas Tech. So if you ever watch a Texas Tech football game or basketball, they'll fix up the Will Rodgers statue. And then also in Fort Worth, they've got Will Rodgers statues there as well. So he touched the entire country. Of course, he lived out in California. There's a park in Beverly Hills named Will Rodgers Memorial Park. His home is out in California, the ranch home he lived at when he was in Hollywood. And he was even honorary mayor of Beverly Hills one time as well. So a lot of connections, and then all across the country and all across the world. This is Australia. He was in Australia, different, being a traveling around in one of the rodeos there in Australia as he was traveling around the world. Went to Germany, met the Kaiser while he was there. So, in any event, it's kind of interesting to see all the places that Will Rodgers touched.
Okay, let's move on.
All right. This gallery's got a lot of saddles. So Will Rodgers had saddles that he collected. People gave to him all across the world. And so we've got different. This is from Chile. We've got Western saddles. We've got from South America and Nicaragua, and just a French saddle over here. So you get to see a lot of the saddles that Will Rodgers had, and then also a lot of the paintings that people did about Will Rodgers. So over time, up here on the wall, our former governor of Oklahoma, Governor Frank Keating, wrote a children's book about Will Rodgers. So up on the wall here, we have a lot of the original paintings that were used in his book as well. So this gallery right here, doesn't tell a whole lot of the story of Will, but it gives you some beautiful paintings and some, interesting saddles that were in his collection. So we're going to be renovating the facility here, hopefully the next couple of years. And that's one of the things we'll be changing, is adding more to the story of Will, because there's so many pictures, so much information about Will, that we want to update this museum with technology and share that with others as well. So as we make our way up into the museum, we have just a little bitty area right here with a Charles Banks Wilson paintings, famous painter from Oklahoma. There's actually a stairway that goes down here, but because of ADA restrictions, it's been closed off for 30 to 40 years. Again, in our renovation, we're hoping to get an elevator down there and open that up for the public.
Logan, can you get closer to that big painting?
Yeah, I want to get closer to the big painting here.
Real close.
Yeah. So Charles Banks Wilson has some beautiful paintings, probably one of the best drawers of Will Rodgers and getting his likeness. And we have one of his paintings that's at the Capitol in Oklahoma City as well, of Will Rodgers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So walking into the rotunda, this facility was built in 1938. Will Rodgers died in 1935. The entire country went into mourning to try to figure out how can we honor Will Rodgers. And one of the ways to do that was to eventually build this beautiful museum. It was built by the state of Oklahoma. So we'll come over here. And this statue, if you watch the news at all, you'll see this statue all the time, because it is in, there's one just like it in the U.S. House of Representatives. So right outside the entryway to the U.S. House of Representatives is this Joe Davidson statue, because Will Rodgers is one of the only humorist that I know of that's in the in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. So when you see interviews on CNN or Fox or whatever it is, a lot of times you'll see Will's statue in the background. It says, "I never met a man I didn't like," which is his most famous quote about the people that he met. But it's just an iconic statue of Will Rodgers that we have. I think I'm going to take this, and while we're here, let's go outside for just a second. The wind is howling a little bit, but we're going to show you a little bit of the Sunken Garden area out here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So this facility was built in 38, but Will was actually buried in California. And but the crowds that came here were just huge. They wanted to pay their respects to Will Rodgers. They had to have the National Guard here to let people in, because the lines of people that were coming were just tremendous. So the family decided they wanted to come to Oklahoma and bury Will Rodgers here at the memorial. So we have the Sunken Garden here that was built in 1944. We'll see if we can go out here and see this okay. And this is the property we mentioned in 1911 that Will built overlooking Claremore. It's just a beautiful view over Claremore.
How many acres do you have, Ted?
About 20 acres. Yeah. So they're about 20 acres up on this hill. When it snows, it's great because kids come up here all the time and sled down the hill. But this was built in 44. Main financier of this was Amon Carter, who was a newspaper man out of Fort Worth, Texas. And so Will Rodgers was moved here in 44. His wife, Betty, died that same year, and she's buried here. And then 3 of Will's children are buried here as well, and then a couple other family members. And Will's son, Will Rodgers Jr., is actually buried in Arizona. So, but the other family members are here with Will Rodgers. So it's kind of unique that we have a museum and then the burial place of Will. All right, we'll head back inside. We have a lot of weddings here as a facility, a lot of receptions that come here as well, just because it's just a beautiful and historic facility that we have. And this is a plaque when it was originally built. Will Rodgers Memorial, built by the people of the state of Oklahoma in tribute to Will Rodgers, native son and world citizen, and dedicated November 4th, which was his birthday, 1938. The world citizen part is kind of big. There's not very many people that can truly be a world citizen. Everybody across the entire world respected and appreciated. Will Rodgers was definitely one of those. All right, back inside. Got a beautiful tall rotunda here that was built. There was a lot of debate on what was going to be this facility when it was built. You know, how are they going to honor Will Rodgers? And it was decided they wanted to have kind of this ranch style house that would be kind of it wasn't even really designed to be necessarily a museum. It was going to have some Cherokee artifacts and a place you just kind of pay respects. And if you think about this is a memorial originally, and so I kind of liken it to the Lincoln Memorial originally, because this was free and open to the public from 1938 to 2012. This is a free and open facility, but due to budget cuts and different things, we started charging an admission fee. So anybody could come in anytime and pay their respects to Will Rodgers. So we're going to go up here. This is what we call the Heritage Gallery. And also, I'll pause right here. If anybody wants to take a different kind of tour, we have an enhanced tour. And if anybody has kids or grandkids have ever seen the movie Cars, Michael Wallace, who is the voice of the sheriff in the movie Cars. He's also the guy that wrote the book about Route 66 and got it going again. But he's our voiceover. He lives here in Tulsa, just up the street, and he's the voice person. So you can go to our website, willrodgers.com, click on Enhanced Tours, and you can hear him describe some of the exhibits as well.
Ted, I can't believe how large this museum is.
It is. It is a very big museum, and I liken it to presidential libraries and just its size. I mean, it's just we've got so much information here. It's an incredibly large museum for one man, and you know, it just again a tribute to what he meant to this country.
Is it a day trip, or would you need 2 days to go through the facility?
Just a day. You know, we have a lot of tour buses come through. They spend about 2 hours. You watch a documentary and you walk through, and you know that's the thing that you know we're going to be working on over the next several years. Is it's a beautiful museum and we have nice plaques up, but there's so much information that we don't have out. So one of the things we're going to be doing as we upgrade is set it up where you can dig in and be here for a day or two, looking at pictures, reading more of his quotes and information, because you know it's kind of you know, like I said, we've got some nice plaques on the wall and different information, but we really want to be able to let people dig in even deeper. So it's a 2 to 3 hour trip, depending on how long you want to spend walking around the museum. And we, on this side of the room, we talk about Will's Cherokee heritage. He was a very, very proud Cherokee. He was about a quarter Cherokee. His mom and dad both were Cherokee. His dad was very involved in Cherokee politics, was a Cherokee senator, judge, and also his dad was part of the Constitutional Convention when Oklahoma was created in 1907. So he was involved in everything. Matter of fact, we're in Rodgers County, which a lot of people think was named after Will Rodgers, but it was named after his dad, Clem Rodgers. So Will had a good upbringing with a family that was very well-to-do, and it's kind of what made him a little bit spoiled probably growing up. His dad they had everything for a youth to do. He had three older sisters that spoiled him. And so, he wasn't one that liked to study much in school. He liked to more goof off and rope the girls. That's one of his favorite things to do. He was a great roper. And so he spent a lot of time roping girls. His dad sent him to military academies, and in military academies, he got 100 demerits and finally got out of that. So he was so full of energy and just always playing and stuff, but it also helped him hone his skills in being a great roper. The family actually had 7 children, only 4 that lived into adulthood, 3 sisters, and then of course Will Rodgers. We got a couple of paintings here. This room is actually designed after Will Rodgers' home in California. So very similar to the fireplace and the roof and the ceiling in here as well. And then Will had 4 children, 3 that lived to adulthood. One of them died when he was 2 years old of diphtheria. But Will Rodgers Jr. actually played Will Rodgers in a movie, the story of Will Rodgers, and then his other son, Jimmy Rodgers.
Close to look at all those pictures.
Yeah. So this is his wife, Betty. They met at a train station in 1900. Will Rodgers was so nervous when he saw Betty in the train station because not very many girls came up to Ulagon. He was up there to pick up some long underwear and a banjo. And when he saw her, he actually took off running. But he courted her for 8 years. And he said that was his greatest rope trick, was getting Betty to marry him. It was one of those love at first sights. And she wasn't ready to date Will. Will wasn't, she wasn't sure how he was going to pay for his life and, what his future was going to be like. But eventually when he was up there in New York doing his vaudeville thing, he eventually talked her into marrying him. So this is one of the items one of the few that's not a ownership of the memorial. This is actually owned by the family. It's a guitar that they had. And then Will Rodgers' daughter down here, Mary Rodgers, and then Will Rodgers Jr., who went on to be a congressman and do a newspaper there in Los Angeles. And he also went and served in World War II. But they moved on to California and lived there. And we have a document in one of Will's silent movies that he made. He made a couple of silent movies on his own dime, which he shouldn't have done because he lost a lot of money. But we're glad that he did, because we have a documentary. It's one day in the life, 1 day in 365, which is kind of a day in Will Rodgers' life in California. So we have that showing in here at all times. So we will make our way down the ramp here. Another thing that we're working on, this is not ADA compliant. So hopefully with our renovations, we can open up the original stairway. So we mentioned Will Rodgers was big in writing and in the movies, but he was also big in radio. So when radio came in, he was in 1922, was his first time to be on radio. He had his own show in the 30s. But in this room is about Will's radio career. And what we have playing in here is a video called Bacon, Beans, and Limousines. But Will Rodgers, imagine this was at the beginning of the Great Depression. And Herbert Hoover was going to speak to the country, but he couldn't draw an audience. So he thought, how can I draw an audience? Well, he invited Will Rodgers to open for him. So, imagine the president today going, I need to get an audience. Who can I get? Can I get Jimmy Fallon or, to open for me? They would never do that today. But back then, he needed an audience, and who better to call than Will Rodgers? And Will Rodgers, being magnanimous that he was, Republican, Democrat, he appreciated them all. He did do it. And in this talk, though, normally he's humorous, and he was, but he was also very poignant in this talk about, he said, we're going to be the first country to go to the poorhouse in a limousine and or drive a car to the poorhouse. And so he just had a lot of commentary about the working man and big business and things. And so after he spoke, and then after the president spoke, actually more people wanted to get Will Rodgers' speech sent to them than they did the president. So we have it playing in here at all times. And just talks more about Will's radio career. Will, he had a Sunday night radio show, and it was so popular that churches would actually move their service around in order to make sure the congregants came to church and then go hear Will Rodgers. So he had a very, very popular radio show in the early 30s for a little while. And then he did, one thing that's amazing about Will Rodgers too is he went to both the Republican and Democrat conventions and talked on the radio there. And, that would never happen hardly today, but Will Rodgers was able to do that and be appreciated by both parties when he was at the conventions. And talk about President's Day, actually, he was nominated for president by Oklahoma one time in 1928. It's kind of a joke. And so he got a couple of votes for presidency, but he would have never done that. He enjoyed his life too much to run for political office. All right, let's roam around here a little bit. So Will Rodgers now is in the 30s or in the 19 teens. He'd been in vaudeville and then went on to the Will Rodgers the Follies from Ziegfield in the teens and became a big star there. So originally he was just a roper, did his rope tricks, but then, then other people started coming in doing rope tricks, and he was an avid reader. So Betty told him, he said, you need to start talking a little bit about the news of the day. So Will started doing rope tricks, and then he started talking about the news of the day because he read so much. And that made him completely unique. And now he had a different show every single night. It wasn't just, oh, I've seen his rope tricks. It was now, what's Will going to talk about with the mayor of New York City or about the president? And so when that started happening, people came to hear Will Rodgers talk. So he moved up in the Ziegfield Follies. People from all over wanted to come and hear Will Rodgers talk every single night. If Will Rodgers made a joke about you, it was a plus. If you were in the audience and he roped you or talked about you and you were in politics, and that was a positive thing. So Will's life really started to change. And so as the Ziegfields went on and he became more and more popular, the movies started to call. So in 1919, he was contacted by doing a movie called Laughing Bill High, and that was the first movie Will Rodgers ever did. So here in the mini theater is a little bit about Will Rodgers' movie career. We have a movie that plays in here all the time, so we rotate these out every single day so you can watch a Will Rodgers movie. But what's really unique, I bet you none of you have ever seen a Will Rodgers movie. And this is pretty fascinating because he was the #1 movie star in 1934. And in 1935, he was #1 male, only got beat by Shirley Temple in 1935. But he was a very, very popular movie star. But after he died, Fox did not release any of his movies to the public. And so they didn't want to look like they were capitalizing off of his death. And so they put his movies away, and you won't see them on Turner Classic Movies or any of the public movies. I think there's only one in the public domain, one or two that are in the public domain, but you just can't see. You've never seen Will Rodgers movies in the public, which is kind of end up hurting his career in the long run as far as people knowing him today. You'll see Laurel and Hardy movies, and you'll see the Marx Brothers, but you won't see a Will Rodgers movie anywhere.
Can we get close-ups? Can we get close-ups of these your posters up?
Yeah. So we have a gentleman who was a big fan of Will Rodgers, and he saw the Will Rodgers Follies, named his son Will, and then he started collecting Will Rodgers memorabilia. So in here we have original Will Rodgers movie posters. He donated all of these to us, and from the county chairman, and we have a lot of stills that were from Will Rodgers, but a big collection of Will Rodgers memorabilia from his movie career. And it's spanned from 1918 to 1935. And then the biggest thing though for Will, he did 51 silent movies, but then it was the talkies that made Will the difference, because then people could hear what he had to say. And Will was known for making up his own lines, so which were always better. The director said they were always better than the ones they wrote for him. So Will would ad-lib his own lines a lot of times in the movies. But when the talkies came in 1927, that's when Will Rodgers' career started to pick up. And he loved Claremore so much. In his very first talking movie was called They Had to See Paris. He played a character from Claremore. He sent a crew to downtown Claremore to shoot that opening shot. And then in the very last movie that was ever put out, shortly after his death, there was one movie left called Steamboat Around the Bend. He named his steamboat the Claremore Queen. So he was a big fan of Claremore and proponent of that in the movies as well. So
I think
anyway,
he made several films with John Ford.
He did. As a matter of fact, there were 3 movies that he made with John Ford. And John Ford, and one of the comments that we heard from him, his favorite movie that he ever did. He did a bunch of them, as you know, from It's a Wonderful Life and Stagecoach, and those that John Ford said that Judge Priest was his favorite movie that he did with Will Rodgers. So anyway, but we actually show a movie here at the end of the month in our theater every month. And last month we showed Stagecoach, which was a John Ford movie with John Wayne. But John Ford and Will did do several movies together. So when Will was living in New York City, and the movie started to call, he had a contract with Ziegfield, but it wasn't written. It was a handshake. And, you know, a lot of Ziegfield, all of every Ziegfield's people had contracts, but Will only did a handshake. And he was a man of his word. So even though Hollywood was calling, he said, you know what, I shook Mr. Ziegfield's hand. I'm going to finish up my contract with him, and then I'll move to Hollywood. And he did. So in 1919, he packed up the family and moved to California. And so this is a reproduction of Will's study in California. If you ever get to go out there, the Pacific Palisades, there's a beautiful home that he bought. He first bought in Beverly Hills, but he had a lot of horses, and well, horses have a tendency to make the place smell a little bit different. And the neighbors didn't care for that too much. So Will eventually bought a big ranch outside of California, or outside of Hollywood in the Pacific Palisades. He's got several hundred acres that oversee the Pacific Ocean on one side and Los Angeles on the other.
Hey, Ted,
Yes.
he made headlines here in New York because of a runaway bull. You want to tell that story?
I do. It's probably the biggest thing that happened to Will. So Will was there in a Wild West show, and so they had the Wild West show that was going on. They were there in Madison Square Garden, and one of the bulls got loose and started heading up the ramps. And so there's several stories out there, but one of them was picked up in the New York Times that Will went in the stands. He roped the bull and saved the people and brought him down. And so all of a sudden, you know, he's headlines about this cowboy from Oklahoma becoming a big star and saving people's lives in Madison Square Garden. And that's what got him the notoriety that he later enjoyed when he was doing in the Follies and on vaudeville. So Madison Square Garden, we owe a lot to Will Rodgers' career and that bull that got loose. And then here again in California, it's where he raised his family for most of his adult life, and just had a beautiful place. He put a little golf course in there. He had a rink that he rode his horses around in. He loved polo. That became one of his favorite things to do. And so he had a polo grounds there that's still there and operational now. And it's now a state park. So when Will died, his family gave this property, or Betty did, to the state of Oklahoma. And then the ranch out in California was given to the state of California to be a park. So like I said, we have a reproduction of his study right here in the museum. All right, let's roam around here. We'll go down the ramp into what we call our South Gallery. Got a couple of hats from Will Rodgers as you walk down here, and some of the celebrity friends, the new Will Rodgers, Shirley Temple and Charles Lindbergh, Dizzy Dean. He was at the 1934 World Series between St. Louis and Detroit, and just a lot of celebrity friends that he had. So this, in our South Gallery here, these are little snippets of Will Rodgers' life. So we have right here the Wild West roper. I mentioned earlier that he went to Australia, but when Will was young, he ran the birthplace ranch. He called it the Dog Iron. His dad let him run it a couple of years, but he didn't really want to be a rancher. He wanted to be a cowboy and free. So he and a buddy of his went to South America to be a gaucho, and they went to Argentina, and that's what Will was going to be, just going to be a gaucho and a cowboy down there. He got there, found out life was really hard, and his friend went home, and Will was down there by himself and broke, and he got a job on a cattle boat that was heading to South Africa. So Will went to South Africa. He's dead broke, doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. He's been writing back home about what's been going on, and they've been publishing it in the Claremore Progress, the newspaper here. And while he was there, as he's trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life, Texas Jack had a circus there, had a Wild West show. And so they needed somebody that could do a big rope trick. And Will Rodgers,
could you just move to the side a little bit so we can get a close look? Thank you.
Yeah. So Texas Jack's Wild West show, they call him the Cherokee Kid, world great champion lassoer. And so that's where Will really got his start in the show business. He got this job at Texas Jack's. He was there for 4 or 5 months, and then he went to Australia and New Zealand and was in some Wild West shows there. And then when he got back to the States, he started doing Wild West shows, which eventually is what took him up to New York, to Madison Square Garden, was in a Wild West show, and then on to vaudeville. But he got to start right here at Texas Jack's in South Africa as the Cherokee Kid. And the rest is kind of history from there.
Hey, Tad, what is the
Yeah.
difference between all the different lassos?
You know, I'm not exactly sure. There's different qualities of the material. Some of the ropes he would, you know, for a small rope trick, he would use one kind of rope for the material and the way that the Hondo was made. And then when he needed a big trick, he'd get a longer rope with a little bit different material for the bigger trick. So he had several different ropes that he used for different tricks that he had. Of course, some of these also probably used on the horses that he rode. He loved riding horses. Said if a man don't love a horse, there's something the matter with him. So he always had his ropes for riding horses. And he was in a lot of rodeos and different things as well. So he eventually made his way up to, from the Follies up to, or from vaudeville, where he started doing more of the rope tricks. He started doing a few jokes in between. His first joke, actually, he made a mistake and made a comment, and the crowd started to laugh. And Will went backstage, and he was kind of upset that the crowd laughed at him because he's a professional. You know, he didn't want to be laughed at. And they said, no, that's good. You know, it's interaction with the crowd. So what Will started doing at that point is he actually started writing in jokes. He had a long list of jokes he would do. He would actually purposely make a mistake so he could make a wisecrack and got the people to laugh. And so that began him on the ability to talk. And then later on is when Betty started convinced him to talk about the news of the day. So it took him a little bit to go from just a roper to a talker and making jokes and on to doing more commentary. But again, being President's Day, we'll talk about the first time he actually got to talk in front of a president. So he was in Baltimore, and Woodrow Wilson was in town, and Woodrow Wilson got in the audience. And Will was so nervous that the president was there because he made a lot of jokes about the president, and now the president was in the audience. So what was the crowd going to think? What was Woodrow Wilson going to think when he made a joke? So they finally literally had to get Will and push him out on stage because he was so nervous, and he made the point to tell everybody, listen, I'm really nervous. The president's here, which probably helped calm him and everybody else down. But he made a joke, and everybody looked to Woodrow Wilson, and Woodrow Wilson laughed. And because of that, it calmed Will Rodgers down. He made a joke about trying to get Pancho Villa, and they would have had him, but as he headed back south across the border, they ran into a bunch of red tape. And so from then on, he started making more jokes about the presidency. And the thing that he built so much credibility in his commentary and his jokes that people knew he had no malice in it. You know, he wasn't trying to hurt anybody. These were just fun jokes. And so that built credibility with all the presidents and people from both parties and all the citizens. So they knew that Will Rodgers had no malice in his heart when he made his jokes.
Has he been interpreted properly, do you think, in movies? I know they made the Will Rodgers story with his son. Do you think it was an accurate depiction of his life?
It was good. And, you know, because Will Rodgers Jr. was in there, that definitely helped. So, you know, but there haven't been a whole lot of movies about Will. There's been a couple of documentaries, but fortunately, because kind of almost what's been going on here recently, I've had so many people say, oh, we just need another Will Rodgers because there's just so much anger and animosity, and you make a political comment and all of a sudden you lose your friends and that kind of stuff. And, you know, Will had the ability to talk to people of both parties and say it in a way that, you know, in an attitude that, you know, we don't need to be getting mad at each other. So we hear this all the time. You know, Will Rodgers is a great role model. And so there's a lot of people that have approached us about doing more documentaries or biopics about Will Rodgers' life. They're actually working with Jennifer Rodgers Echeverry about doing that. She has owns the family name and those kind of things. So we're hoping that the public will get to hear a little bit more about Will Rodgers and his life as a citizen, because he is a great role model. I mean, he just treated people with so much respect. And, you know, it's just something that we need as a country and as a world right now, somebody like that to look up to.
And the Will Rodgers Follies was quite popular.
It is. Matter of fact, that's our next stop here on our little tour. So we have the Will Rodgers Follies that show here all the time. He went on to the Ziegfield Follies, and then in 1991, the Will Rodgers Follies was in Broadway, and it won a lot of awards. I think it was 9 Tony Awards that it won. Very popular at that time, very patriotic.
Let's look inside there and see what you have.
Yeah, so we got Will Rodgers up here with a bunch of the Ziegfield girls, which he liked to joke that he would come out, and when he would go back inside or come out to do his show while the girls changed from nothing into less nothing. And they were always changing clothes all the time. But we have the Will Rodgers Follies that shows right here all the time, so people can sit here and watch that. But this did a really good job of sharing the experience and the life of Will Rodgers. Carradine was the one that first played Will Rodgers, and then Larry Gatlin played Will Rodgers. and some really good celebrities that did that. Over here, we have a couple more saddles. What's interesting about this saddle was given to Patricia Ziegfield, the daughter of Billy Burke. So you might not know the name Billy Burke right off the top, but if you've ever seen The Wizard of Oz and you know the Good Witch, then the Good Witch was Billy Burke. That was good friends of Will Rodgers. So we have the saddle that Will Rodgers gave to the Ziegfields, who now it's in our museum. And it's a beautiful Ray Percy painting that was done a couple of decades ago that just gives a whole picture of Will Rodgers' life. We have a lot of events that come in the museum, and they'll set up tables right in here for this beautiful view. Then we go over here, we got a few more movie posters about Will Rodgers' life. And, we talked about going more in depth into Will Rodgers. We have a few pictures and paintings here of Will and some pictures of his movies, but we really need to have an ability to dig in deep to Will Rodgers' movies, more commentary that he did about those. So we'll do more in these little exhibits. But this was Will Rodgers, a little bit about his movie career. And as we mentioned, Will Rodgers was a prolific writer. I mean, imagine every single day he's doing movies, he's doing radio, and every day he's writing a daily article that's in over 400 newspapers across the country. So he would get his little typewriter and he would peck out, a 1 to 2 or 3 sentence column that he would send out to the newspapers, to the Western Union, had to be in by 5 o'clock, and then would be in all the newspapers the next day. So, everybody was reading about Will Rodgers, was seeing him in the movies or listening to him on the radio. But he wrote over 1 million words in his writings, and so that's what we have most documented about his life. Over here we have Charles M. Russell and Will were good friends. Charles M. Russell was a great cowboy artist that did a lot of paintings in New York as well. And this is an original that he did of Will Rodgers here, called Will Rodgers here on his horse in 1924 that this was done. All right, so we're about to walk in the new wing. It was built in '82. So from right here back this direction we've been, that was the original building. That was 1938. And then in 1982, the Oklahoma legislature built a new wing on the facility, and that's what we'll walk into now. So on this wall, this was done a long time ago, but it talks a little bit about Will's travels around the world. So went to Europe all the time, to China, India, Australia, and South America. But Will just loved to travel. He really didn't like being on a boat, but that was kind of one of the ways to do it. But he did the boat a lot, and he threw up a lot. But he loved to fly. That was his biggest passion. I mean, when airplanes came out, Will Rodgers was on a plane. He said, if you have anywhere to go and your time means anything until you get on a plane. This is back when people were dying in plane crashes. 25% of mail planes and things were going down. But Will knew that was the future. He even tried to convince Congress to have an Air Force back in the early 30s. He was a big fan of Doolittle and getting an Air Force. And he did everything he could to try to get that to happen. But he loved to fly. A couple of things here that are interesting. You talk about, Will Rodgers is a humorist. He liked to consider himself a journalist as well. But how many humorists have a nuclear submarine or a battleship named after him? And Will Rodgers had a battleship and a nuclear submarine. And again, that tells you what he meant to this country and to politicians, that they would name a nuclear submarine after him. Yeah, we actually had a reunion from the Will Rodgers people that served in the submarine that'll come here. They came here a couple of years ago for one of their one of their reunions, and they come periodically here. So it's kind of neat to see that. Now we're going to go in the Diorama Gallery, and I kind of mentioned it used to be where the gift shop is, but we've renovated this a little bit, and this used to be a garage area, but now we've got these wonderful dioramas by a gentleman named Joe Mora, and the detail that goes into these are just tremendous. So it goes from his birthplace here. These are actual real trees that every now and then we got to go in there and clean them with a fine-tooth comb if we get some spider webs and stuff on them, but all these are sandstone dioramas about Will's life, and it's the Claremore Progress over here. You can see the guys smoking cigarettes, and here's Will Rodgers here walking through downtown Claremore. I just love the Diorama Room and the detail and the sharing of Will Rodgers' story. And a couple of them that I really like over here, we've got the Ziegfield Follies, a couple of them here on the ranch where he's, roping people or roping cattle. Let's see. And then here's one over here of his ranch out in California. You can see that all right. But the details and the dining room, and if you go out to his ranch in California, and you sit at the dining room table he was at, there's still gum underneath. Will loved to chew gum. He'd chew gum, and when he was doing rope tricks, he'd put his gum up on the wall and do more rope tricks and take the gum down and chew it when it was over with. But the table still has gum from Will Rodgers when he was there. But the detail of that is just gorgeous. Over here is one of his movies, The Connecticut Yankee. And you can see Will Rodgers, he's over here typing his daily column while he's also shooting The Connecticut Yankee, which is a Mark Twain novel. And he was a big humanitarian. What a lot of people don't realize, Will Rodgers was a big star and everything, but he's also a huge humanitarian. He traveled to places, didn't just write checks. He personally went, raised money for them. He'd go into small towns and go into their gymnasium and talk for 2 hours just to raise money for those communities, which is very, very rare. I mean, how many celebrities today, will go to a small town, go in the gym and talk for a couple hours just to help them raise some money? And he did. He also went to Nicaragua when they had a big earthquake there, and that's what this diorama depicts. And of course, yes.
Can you give us, because I'm looking at the clock here, an idea of the last days that he had?
Let's go there right now, and I will do that.
Thank you.
I know I get long-winded talking about Will. He's got so much of a life to talk about it. But it's also amazing. I mentioned him going to these communities and talking. Will would go and talk for 2 hours at these different events, fundraising for people, and people wanted more. You think about who sits and listens to a person talk for 20 minutes today, much less 2 hours. But Will just had that ability to communicate with people, and he would go into the town ahead of time, get the newspaper, and read about the celebrities, the mayor of the town and who's the big businessman. Then he would joke about him while he was up on stage. And so he knew how to connect with audiences because of his Ziegfield and Follies days there in New York. But then, like I said, Will was a big aviation supporter. He loved to fly everywhere. And Wiley Post was another fellow Oklahoman. They knew each other a little bit. And Wiley is an amazing character. He flew around the world twice, once by himself, which is amazing, with just a compass. He got 2 ticker tape parades in New York City, just a famous aviator. And Will had total trust in him. Well, Wiley wanted to fly to Alaska and get a mail route to Russia. Well, he needed somebody to help finance it. And so he talked to Will, and Will loved to travel. And so what Will would do is he would do movies in the spring, and then he would take off in the summer and fall and go do stuff. So in 1935, he was going to go with Wiley Post to travel to Alaska. So they left on August 7th, 1935 to head to Alaska. They flew up there. Will was having a great time stopping at the different locations. He said, hey, he'd get off the plane and go, hey, anybody here from Claremore, and joke about that. But on August 15th, 1935, they were heading to Point Barrow, which is the northernmost point in Alaska, and this Alaska territory. And as they were flying, they got lost in the fog, and Wiley landed at a lagoon. We saw some Eskimos, and he was getting directions. They were just 12 miles away. And as the plane started to take off, the engine died and fell down and crashed in the lagoon and killed both men instantly. Of course, the world didn't know. I mean, they were in such a remote area. It took them a while for the Eskimo. He ran from that point to Point Barrow. Then the word got out to the entire world that Will Rodgers and Wiley Post had died. And immediately the world went into mourning. I mean, you're already in the Great Depression. And here's the most popular person. Like I said, everybody read about him every day, watched him in the movies, listened to his radio, just loved this man. Everybody cared about him. And then he died. And so when he died, every newspaper, of course, with a headline about Will Rodgers dying. Telegraphs came in from celebrities all over the world. Friends, Charlie Chaplin, Laurel and Hardy, Franklin Roosevelt, Nancy Astor from England. And then, of course, the newspapers all over the world had Will Rodgers and Wiley Post had died in an airplane crash. So a completely tragic time for this country, and the outpouring of love for Will Rodgers was just tremendous. And over here, we have an exhibit of things that were found with Will Rodgers when he died. So we have that here as well. What's interesting, one of our curator here was looking through one of the bags that was in the plane crash, and this was 70 years after the fact now, and she's going through the bag and she thinks she's going to open it up and there's going to be just, cotton balls or something in there kind of protecting the bag. When she opened it, it was Will's underwear and different items that had been in that bag for over 70 years from the crash. So kind of a little treasure trove of things that she found that we have here in the museum. So
Can we get a closer look inside there,
yeah.
Ted? Thank you.
Here's a suit that he had, pocket watches, so it tells you exactly what time that he crashed. This was a little toy that was given to him by some kids before he left, and he just loved to play with it. And he had that in his pocket when he died, pocket watches, and just some different things that he had with him in the crash. So tragic moment for our country. And the entire country went in the mourning. They compare it to Lincoln's death when the whole country mourned. I would argue that he was probably the most popular person in American history. Presidents, it was, George Washington was beloved, but they all have some political enemies. Abraham Lincoln the same way. But for Will Rodgers, when he died, the entire country, rich and poor, black and white, whatever religion that you were, everybody mourned for the death of Will Rodgers. Our former governor, Governor Nye, tells a story. He was in Colorado Springs, about 6 years old, and he remembers the car stopping in the road in Colorado Springs, the kids doing the extra read all about it, and people getting out of their cars and just hugging each other and weeping because they just heard about Will Rodgers passing. So that happened all over the country, people coming out of their houses and in tears.
Ted, I want to tap into John. I'm sure he has some questions from our viewers for you.
Okay. All right.
Well, yeah, we've got a couple. One interesting bit of trivia. One of our frequent guests, Jeff, the opera addict, mentions that his second cousin played violin in the pit orchestra for the Will Rodgers Follies.
Oh, really? So, that is great.
Got a very personal connection. That happens a lot with our audience. They know people, they've met people. It's fantastic.
That's neat.
Also, Janice is asking, though we know the answer, we've touched on it a little, was Will married with a family? And so the answer, of course, is yes.
Yes. Betty Blake, she was from Rodgers, Arkansas. And like I said, Will fell in love with her. It took 8 years to get her to marry him. And then they got married and moved to New York and had 4 children. Like I said, one died in infancy and the other 3 lived to adulthood. Mary, his daughter, was actually in a play with Humphrey Bogart. And they played about a character that died in a plane crash. Some people say it happened around the same time, but it was near the same time she was in this play. And after Will died, she never was in a play again. She was just crushed after he passed away. Put that down, Logan.
And then where, if you know, did Will live when he was in New York City?
There's a couple of places. I think I mentioned to you before, if I can read, the Q Corner, I believe, is one of the houses. And the Putnam House, I think, is the name of the other one. And it was a place just kind of where several of the actors from vaudeville would get together and live. So we did have somebody that went over there one time and took a picture of it, of exactly where it was. I haven't got to go there yet. I'm going to put that on my to-do list one of these days to get to go to New York and try to see exactly where he lived. But
I should write that down too. Yeah, because you mentioned he one of those places was in Kew Gardens in Queens.
Yeah, Kew Gardens, that's right, in Queens.
By the way, we've got people in our audience from that area all the time. So this is a very personal connection now for them too.
Well, the Putnam House, I believe, is where he stayed with several people, but Kew Gardens, I think, was where he and his family actually settled in and lived for several years. So I hope you find it. If you do, send me a picture.
I would like to do that. His son was born there. Is that correct?
Yes, all the kids were born there in New York. Yeah. So before they left California, they were all born in New York.
Cool. And then do you know how many films he made?
He made 71 movies. 51 of those were talkies were silent movies. And then the rest were talkies. So, and the sad thing about the silent movies is, we lost a lot of those to time. They were made on that nitrate film that no longer is with us. But we did have several movies, silence, that we did make. Logan, I'm going to show them one more thing real quick. We're over here by the Rope and Fool. Will Rodgers made a couple of movies on his own dime. Again, it was a big mistake because he lost a lot of money. But this one's called The Roping Fool. You can actually see it online. So if you go online and type in Will Rodgers, the roping fool, it is there, but it shows you his rope tricks, and it tells you how incredibly talented this guy was. If he hadn't made this movie and lost his shirt, we might not have known about all this, but he made it, and now we have posterity about how amazing of a roper that he was. Okay.
Okay, John, what do we have to close out?
All right, so I've got a few items that I'm going to share. I'll share some right now. I'll flash them up on the screen, but these are all going to be in our follow-up email on Wednesday. So if you can't stick it out or if you can't write it down fast enough, don't worry. We'll have you covered. So I want to start with, let me get my screen shared. I want to start with the website for the Will Rodgers Museum. Definitely go check it out. There's a ton of information there, especially when I want to draw your attention to support. Become a member, help out. There are some hopefully big renovations coming soon. So let's do our part to help. And you can also help by shopping at shopwillrodgers.com. And Tad, did you say that Will's great-granddaughter is running the online shop?
Yes, Jennifer Rodgers Etcheberry is her name, and she helps
fantastic.
out and does the online store. Yes.
So yeah, that's still in the family. And there were a couple of books that from the gift shop, Will Rodgers and the Great White House Sleepover. So pick that up for children, grandchildren, and then Will Rodgers by Betty Rodgers. Tad, you recommended that as the book to go to. So
yes,
our audience should pick those up, pick them up from the gift shop. That way you can also help out the museum. And then I'm going to include the Rope and Fool in the email. So there's the whole video is up on YouTube. So everyone should check that out and see those skills that really got Will his start in performing.
You're sending the link, John?
Yeah, I'll share this link as well. And all of this will be in our follow-up email on Wednesday. So everyone should get a copy of that. And then for to keep in touch with us, you can find Sal on YouTube, where other virtual road trips, including this one will be up there too, so people can revisit it. And we've got Facebook. This is being streamed to Facebook, so this will be available there as well if anyone needs to see it there. Instagram, Sal's on Twitter all the time, posting lots of trivia, tidbits, and interesting finds, so check that out. And home base is southstgeorge.com, where you can see everything we've got coming up. So we hope to see people there as well.
All right, thank you, John, and thank you, Tad. Tad, this turned out to be quite illuminating. I did not realize how large your facility is, and you gave us a great representation of who Will Rodgers actually was.
Well, thank you, Sal. Thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. I think Will is just a great citizen in American history, and we hope that you go one of these days get down here to visit us.
One last question. Why do you think Will Rodgers' name is not as prominent today as it was back then?
Well, there's been a lot of celebrities that have come and gone since that time. And I think a large part of it is, Fox kept the movies, and again, a very noble reason. And so you don't get to see any of his movies much. I think you can still get to see Will Rodgers quotes. I know in the news, they'll throw those out periodically. But it's been a long time since he's passed away. And, that's part of our charge, is to remind people of what he meant to this country. So I take it on myself. I've got 4 boys that we want them to learn about Will Rodgers, and hopefully you'll be hearing more about Will Rodgers in the public square in the years to come.
And that taps into what our job is, to keep the memory of these icons alive. And thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you for everything that you're doing. We appreciate that.
Before we go, I've got one other cool personal connection. The guest's name on Zoom is Karen's iPad, so I'm going to assume it's Karen, but correct me if I'm wrong. Karen says, my 8-year-old son was in the show Will Rodgers Follies with all 3 Wills. So you can't get today a more personal connection than that.
No doubt. That is great.
Yeah,
well, we are thrilled that we had that Broadway musical for sure.
Cool.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much for being part of our program today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.